Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar where we're gonna learn how to drive traffic and convert more with meta searches. My name is Johan and I will be your moderator today in this webinar. So here we go. First, Myhotelshop founder and managing director Ulrich Kastner will talk about the process of driving traffic using meta searches and AdWords. Then Instaroom's co-founder and CEO, Niklas Pettersson, will talk about how to convert those guests once they get to your website. This should last approximately 25 minutes, and we will leave 10 to 15 minutes at the end for questions you might have. And you will all, I will keep you all muted until then. Now, I would like to introduce Ulrich Kastner. Let me just get him up here. Hang on.
Maybe you should.
Ulrich, can you hear me?
Perfect. Yes, I can hear you. And if you put everyone on mute, I hope you don't put me on mute as well.
Not anymore.
Good. Perfect. Excellent. Thanks a lot. And hello to everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar. I see that we have quite a few interested participants, which is great for a Friday afternoon. That's what it's all about today. And Johan, if you can put on the next slide. I think the topic for today is really about how can you actually improve your revenues on your website. And obviously, when you want to drive your traffic and when you want to drive your revenue on your website, there are two main factors that you need to take into consideration. You need to have visitors on your website first, because obviously without visitors on your website, nobody can book. And then once you have them on your website, obviously the second biggest important thing is actually convert them into bookers. So I'm taking over basically the part of how you can drive traffic and what is important, and how to focus your marketing, to create a direct booking experience, increase your online visibility, because in the first place, it's not only about just getting the traffic, because people need to find you in the first place. And how people find you, I'm going to talk about in the next slide. So next slide, please, Johan. What you can see in the next slide is basically an overview of the customer journey. So a customer journey, and most of you have heard about it, and this is actually a very old slide. I've been using it, I think, for the last 15 years almost, is that people basically have several stages of how they make a hotel room booking. So they plan, they book. Once they book, they come to your hotel, and after they leave your hotel, they usually talk about your hotel. And as you can see in parts of the logos, you can see which players are active in which part of the customer journey. Clearly, as a hotel, we mainly focus a lot on the booking path, right? If you look at your booking source statistics, you can basically see that many bookings come through Booking.com, through Expedia, but obviously, hopefully, also through your direct channels, online and offline. But nevertheless, what you need to understand is that a majority of the booking that actually comes through also Booking.com and Expedia don't really start on these platforms. It's not that these platforms have an unlimited brand where 100% of the bookings actually start with their own brand, but these guys actually have a high core competency in getting like traffic and bookings and bookers through other platforms like Google, Trivago, and TripAdvisor. So these are the platforms where people actually search and they actually book somewhere else. And interestingly enough, there has been tons of research over the last several years. When you ask people, you ask consumers where they actually have booked a room, they are most likely to answer you that they booked it on Google or on Trivago rather than on Booking.com and Expedia, even though when you ask the hotel where this client has booked, obviously the hotel would answer, yes, they came through Booking.com. And why is that? Because people obviously make their purchase decision on a different platform where they actually make the booking. And Booking.com has been a super expert in actually understanding where people search, how people search, what business models these platforms run. So how does Google work? How does Trivago work? How does TripAdvisor work? And drive the right converting traffic to their platform. And when we talk about direct business, in the very first place, and that's something I've been teaching many people in my previous lives at Accor in Hilton, and I always told them, look, we really need to be where Booking.com is, right? It's not that we need to reinvent the wheel, and it's not that from a marketing perspective that we need to make big research about where we can find clients online, it's quite easy. We simply need to do what Booking.com and Expedia do very well, and we need to be like at least doing it in a competitive way. So obviously, we're looking at the booking funnel and getting more control of the booking funnel just by understanding where people search. So in the booking powers of Google and Trivago, TripAdvisor, and other players, these are the platforms we need to understand, and we need to understand how they work. Perfect. Next slide, please. I put together some, let's say, high-level points why we actually should think about a direct strategy, why then obviously we need to do online marketing, and why unfortunately many of these online platforms that we're talking today are actually not working on a commission model, but they're working on a cost per click model, and why this is actually not so bad after all if you understand it correctly. So basically, as I said before, your hotel is live on meta search platforms and on Google, if you want it or not. As soon as you put inventory out there somewhere, as soon as you give inventory to an OTA, you're actually automatically also sold on platforms like Trivago and TripAdvisor. But then obviously the people cannot book you through TripAdvisor and Trivago, but they will obviously send forward to that OTA you're working with. So indirectly, even today, you already spent money on meta search, but you do it by spending commission on Booking.com, and they basically take that commission and reinvest it in buying traffic on these platforms. But the point is that obviously we need to understand that the clients, when they make the purchase decision on that platform, that we need to win them back. If we want to make a long-term ownership of those clients, if we want to get back control over OTAs, we need to understand that we need to communicate with the clients directly, and that we need to go where the client is and not just leave that field over to the OTAs. It's not a lot of people, if you speak about direct bookings, it's not always just about costs. And I mean, obviously, a meta search in Google costs you money as well, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But it's also to even out your distribution chain and not just get all your booking through one or two channels, but also add up additional channels where you can buy clients from, and then basically have a range of portfolios where you can get clients from, and that obviously reduces your dependency also towards Booking.com and Expedia. On the other side, it's also important to understand how platforms like Trivago, Google, and TripAdvisor work. Because if you don't understand their business model, you cannot increase your visibility, right? Because like any other platforms, these platforms are search engines after all, and a search engine always has a ranking algorithm. Like Booking.com and Expedia also have ranking algorithms, and if you're on page 10, people very likely won't find you. So you also need to understand how you can manage your visibility on those platforms. With or without your website connected, there are several ways of doing that. And that obviously can increase your market share in your destination. Just by being on top at TripAdvisor, and you all know that, might increase your business. Not necessarily through your website only, but also through indirect channels. So it's all about having more and additional players in the supply chain, but not adding up the players within the supply chain, but adding up your portfolio of platforms that can provide you with customers. So don't make the supply chain longer, make it shorter, but increase the amount of players you're working with. That actually is something where we also talk about monopolies, right? Because we all know that, like especially Booking.com in many European countries, literally has a monopoly on the online bookings, and in some countries even a monopoly almost when it comes to the total amount of business. So now the problem is, how can you work with Trivago, TripAdvisor, and Google? Yeah, usually these platforms are not OTAs, so you cannot sell rooms directly through them, but you need to connect your own website and you need to participate in their business model. And their business model is that they monetize on traffic. So they have good search results, a good customer experience, and then they send on the traffic to another platform. And they send it to the platform who pays the highest CPC usually on a very, very easy level. Yeah? And CPC is risky. Yeah, absolutely. Of course you have to risk, you have to spend the money up front. That's a big difference to commission, where you can lay back and you can wait for the clients to come and then you pay once you have them. But on the other side, Booking.com is taking the risk every day by investing your commission on these platforms. And they wouldn't do so if they weren't profitable. So obviously, it's an option for you to also go straight for the clients and potentially get clients even cheaper. Yeah? So you can also, when you obviously work directly on these platforms, when you work directly on Google or Google Hotel Ads, AdWords or Trivago. And by managing a CPC directly on these platforms rather than having it done by Booking.com, you have a much deeper influence. You can have also a much deeper granular level of optimization. And after all, and that's something I can prove you on the next slide, that we also have a lot of results where you can see that you, in the end, even though you pay a cost per click, you potentially spend much less money than on the commissions you pay to the OTAs. But if you do that, it only works if you understand what you do and if you optimize it regularly. And if anyone wonders what Myhotelshop does, it's exactly what we do. We help hotels doing that. We help hotels understanding these kind of platforms, and we help hotels to optimize it, because a lot of hotels obviously have a problem in managing these platforms because the business models are new, cost per click is unknown, but it's also a problem of know-how. And very often, even if hotels have know-how and have all that knowledge, it's a matter of time. A lot of hotels simply also don't have the time and the technology to actually do that. And I call this inventory management 3.0 or revenue management 3.0, right? Because in the past, we were dealing about revenue management on several platforms. And now you not only need to do revenue management, you need to do CPC and inventory management on these platforms with completely new business models. It sounds risky, yeah, it sounds new, but as I said, the biggest risk in life is not to take any risk at all. Next slide, please. Good, this is coming up. So let's give you some facts, because obviously we have a lot of hotels who do what I just described, and it's much different to 4 years ago when I started doing what we do, because a lot of hotels 4 or 5 years ago, they looked at us and they said, oh God, cost per click, I'm never going to do that. And do you have any examples how it works? And I didn't. Today, we have 1,700 hotels with Myhotelshop only being live on meta search, but you can also see that most of the hotel chains and most of the smaller hotel chains in Europe are actually live on meta search as well. And again, they wouldn't do it if it wasn't profitable. So it's really about, understanding that there's a huge opportunity, because as a matter of fact, I would say that more than 50% of the Booking.com and Expedia volume that you actually get into your hotel indirectly already comes from Meta and Google and affiliates of them. So of these 1,800 hotels, 1,700 hotels we have live, I can show you that 80% of those hotels doing meta search management directly and Google AdWords directly on those platforms actually have lower costs than what they pay in terms of OTA commissions. How much lower? That's quite a difference. So Google AdWords, for example, the average distribution cost that we currently have on a cost per click model. So we basically spend the click and then we look at the revenues and then we divide cost by revenue, which brings you actually an effective commission, is currently around 8 to 8.5%. So every booking you get through AdWords that doesn't come through Expedia but through your website comes through 8%. And if you imagine that you would have paid if that booking would have come through an OTA between 15 and 23%, that obviously means a significant saving. And in the end of the day, it means a significant reduction or increase of your profitability or reduction of your cost. An average Myhotelshop hotel by now, once we have them live on all these platforms, has around 25% or more of their total revenue through their own website. If you think about your own numbers, compare them, and let me know if that is less. And usually it is, because if you're not live on traffic platforms like Google and Meta Search, usually your direct revenue is potentially between 5 and 15%. So simply by adding hotels to these additional traffic platforms, we get a significant increase of direct website bookings. That's one side of the story. But if you also look at the costs, we can see that those hotels in total, on their total room revenue, which includes OTAs, obviously also telephone bookings, but direct website bookings, they get their revenue for 2 to 3% more profit. And if your hotel with 1 million euro, that's between 20 and 30,000 euro a year. That's a lot of money you can spend on service that you can use as an owner to buy yourself a car or whatever you need. So but basically, there are a few things that you need to consider, because it's not coming as granted to be successful on meta search. We have, as you see above, around 20% of hotels fail, right? It's a good chance, right? So if I speak to a hotel, I can actually say, well, the likelihood that it works is actually currently around 80%. So if you have 4 out of 5 hotels, you usually have a good results, or if some of them even have very good results, or at least you're not more expensive than OTA, but there are also 20% of the hotels that fail. So what did you need to do is obviously you need to look at your conversion, right? You need to have a state-of-the-art booking engine. We see a huge difference in booking engine providers. There are booking engine providers where hotels on average have 80% of the hotels fail on meta search simply because the conversion of the booking engine is too low. We also still see a lot of hotels with bad websites in the market. Obviously, we are living in the mobile age. More than 50% of the traffic nowadays comes through mobile phones. If you still don't have a responsive website, that's obviously something you need to look at. I think there's also more around conversion that is added by Nicholas, how you can sustain conversion by adding, for example, tools like Instaroom. But there's one more thing apart from conversion that really has a huge impact, and that's obviously rate parity. A meta search is a price comparison. If you don't have the best price, you're not going to win the traffic, you're not going to get the conversion. Price is a crucial basic rule of making money on a meta search or making money on Google. There are quite easy numbers. What we can see if a hotel is not working in rate parity, you usually get a benefit on the cost per click costs from meta searches. So usually, if you have a lower price on your website, the cost per click you have to pay on a meta search is on average usually 20% lower than what you have to pay on a rate parity situation. So as a matter of fact, if you have a 5% lower price, you can save up to 20% of your marketing spends on meta searches. But there's another super important thing, because we see that hotels that don't have rate parity, but that are 5% cheaper, and it's not that you have to do more than 5%, 5% is usually enough. But if you have 5% cheaper than an OTA, your conversion rates on your website also increase by 50%. So if you save 20% marketing costs and you have a conversion increase by 50%, all that for a reduction of 5% on your price, on your own website, which on top obviously sends a right marketing message and which sends an overall message to the client that direct is better, that is obviously something that has a huge impact on your performance. One thing I always tell my hotels is like, I know it's cost per click, and I know you see it as a marketing cost. And I know a lot of hotels come to us and they say, I want to spend €1,000 per month. But if you spend €1,000 per month, you might only be live for 5 days on Trivago, right? Maybe you have much more traffic. And we can measure the return of your costs. We can see how much money you spend, and we can see with our technology how many people actually book and how much revenue they generate. And if you spend €1,000 in 5 days and you make €10,000, your costs are 10%. So the question is, why would you stop spending money? Why would you stop spending money only because you have €1,000 budget? That doesn't make any sense. If Booking.com doubles the revenue from 1 month to the other, you spend twice as much commission on them as well. So if you're profitable and if you're cheaper on a marketing channel, you can spend as much money as you want as long as your costs are below an OTA. You should put an unlimited budget on it. Only because it's a cost per click doesn't mean that you cannot look at it as a commission. And that's what we usually do to hotels. That's what we usually do with our clients. We tell them, look, you tell us a maximum commission that you're willing to pay. You can say whatever, maybe the maximum commission is like whatever, the maximum cost is like Expedia, like 23, 25%. So as long as you stay below 25%, you can spend as much money as you want. Some hotels might be at 15% cost, at 12%, and they already have the maximum spend. But maybe you only spend 10% of your opportunity. You might have very good results, but there might be more fish out there that you can get. But obviously your costs might increase. Push for it. Push for it. Our job is to actually make sure that costs don't explode, that you stay below your maximum commission. But maybe you stay at the maximum commission, but you could also stay lower, and that's the difference in CPC. Maybe you're much cheaper, but you need to give it a try. You need to give it a range, and you need to handle marketing costs like distribution costs. And obviously, to be successful on that part, I mean, you can work with us. You can use our technology. You can use our campaign managers. That's obviously something I'm always happy to offer. But apart from that, we are also doing a lot of educational parts, so you can join our seminars and webinars just to understand better yourself, and obviously can manage your campaigns, obviously also yourself. Great, that was basically it. I hand over now to Nicholas, who will then take over and explain a little bit more about how you can convert that traffic you paid a lot of money for before. And obviously, the better the conversion, the better return of investment on the marketing channels. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Udi. Thank you for a great presentation and some really interesting points. Again, want to emphasize on what Udi said here. Thank you so much for logging in, everybody, on a Friday afternoon. Very excited to have you guys with us. You can change slide, Johan, please. So just to follow up on the points of Uli and in regards to direct traffic. So you spend time and resources now on converting your on bringing in direct bookers. So what is the next steps and how can you convert this into bookers, basically? So to re-emphasize on that, and please change the slide, Johan. There is a lot of focus in general, of course, at hotels to try to encourage guests to book direct. And there's all sorts of tools out there that can be used, and there's all kinds of good ideas about what guests should and shouldn't do. However, to really capture these guests, we have to ask ourselves, why would a guest book direct? Most guests aren't aware of the industry standards about the high commissions, etc. And honestly, they don't really care. So guests care about the things that make the experience better. Otherwise, they might as well book via the OTAs. And OTAs save time, and because of their brand recognitions, are trusted by the consumer. So in order to win direct bookings, you need to offer something that OTAs can't. Otherwise, there's no reason for the consumer to change their booking habits. I personally believe that the main differentiating factors can be boiled down into two main things. One, better price, and two, better service. You need to win on at least one of these things, and preferably both, in order to win back the direct bookings. Next slide, please. I'm also going to take just a few minutes to go through what you can do in order to capture the guests while they are on your website. And we will cover three main topics, which address price, the customer experience, and analytics. So in order to compete with OTAs, you have to challenge them with marketing on your website. And one thing we know for sure is that a lot of travelers visit your hotel website in the hotel booking research phase. So with the combination of your guests from marketing campaigns, meta search, and AdWords, and guests who come from OTAs, and actually 52% of travelers that visit the hotel website have seen the property on an OTA. And again, here, eventually you will have the traffic. So compel the guests to stay on your website and book through you with a call to action or through different types of pop-ups. And try the different calls to action and see what works. Evaluate. And again, make the call to action constantly available so that they can revisit it at multiple times. And as a second point, you need to reward direct bookers with a better price or add-ons. So add incentives like a discount, like a free upgrade, free breakfast, or special packages available only on the hotel site that ultimately will entice the customer to book direct. So for example, click here to get 5% discount or get a free room upgrade with booking direct. It doesn't have to cost much for the hotel, but it can offer a great value instead of actually dropping the rate. So again, ensure that the guest knows that they are getting a better deal. So did you know that actually over 75% of travelers that believe the best hotel deals, they're actually found on OTAs like Booking.com and Expedia. So keep in mind that you're playing the long game here, and you need to be able to educate the guest at the same time. So how do you do this? Well, first of all, recognize the guest for booking direct. Thank them for booking direct and inform them that this is why they get a better deal. Show them the price difference. You paid XYZ by booking direct, whereas our current public rate is XYZ plus 10%. Or they will only get access to the best rooms directly through you. And also, as a fourth point, lastly, make sure that you educate and empower your team about what it means to your hotel to get direct bookings. So employees often maybe don't fully understand the distribution cost and that OTAs are actually much more expensive than direct. And I can actually, the number of times that I personally have called a hotel and tried to get a good deal, and they actually end up offering me a quote that is a higher price than, for example, one of the OTAs. And if I ask about it, they simply say, well, this is the quoted price. So of course I end up booking on booking.com instead. So again, emphasizing on the educational piece here as well, making sure that the entire team is aligned with understanding the added value of getting more direct business. And empower your team to get the right price with hotel guests and for them to beat external offers. So it's better to drop the rate to the guest and to lower the rate than to lower the rate elsewhere and to pay the commission on top of it. So again, re-emphasizing on what Uli mentioned there. And also, I feel that as a guest, you have to be able to offer a worse deal or they won't book direct again. So make sure that they feel very comfortable and that you have acknowledged the fact that they made a good deal by booking through you. So change slide you want to, please. As we mentioned before, the website is most likely the most visited department at your hotel. So with the new technology that's currently in place, and it has become very and extremely important to be part of the customer journey. So your website is there, and it's how to make sure that you communicate with your guests so that they communicate with you in order to ensure everyone's expectations are aligned. So many people save up for a long time to take a vacation. And ultimately, our goal in hospitality is to make sure that the experience is, of course, worth it. So the first step in creating the perfect customer journey is to create excitement on your website. So use high quality pictures and highlight what makes your hotel unique. You want to make the guests excited about your hotel and what kind of access your hotel offers to the destination. So first point, of course, images. So important today, and make sure you have at least 7 high quality images in your gallery. And from my past experience at a wholesaler, we saw that hotels that didn't offer at least 7 high quality images, they did not get booked as nearly as often. Omnichannel, something that Uli also emphasized on, make sure that you're available and look good on all digital channels. You should have as much attention to detail on your website as at your front desk. So update your website whenever you have new photos, new offers, or special events. When planning on booking a trip, 95% of tourists switch between devices. So it's very important that you're mobile friendly and that you look good everywhere. And display the info that guests are looking for, and remove the hassle of people calling or emailing. The most frequently asked questions are related to how to get to the hotel, parking, breakfast, check-in, and check-out. So make sure that the guests can find these frequently asked questions easily. And make sure that guests has a way to contact you. Not every guest feels comfortable or is able to book through booking engines. And 20% of bookings are actually complicating bookings and cannot be achieved either through OTA booking engines or through your own. So make sure you're available to help out with these high ADR revenue opportunities. And a great way to present is to be there through messaging and to have a messaging widget on your website. And actually, over 88% of millennials, they prefer messaging as the main communication tool. And actually today, millennials represent 20% of the total traveling population. So a big segment to tap into. And ultimately, of course, it saves time and money for both your property and the guests by actually eliminating the need for time for consuming expensive phone calls. And of course, personalize your website so that the guest feels comfortable navigating your site. So recognize the returning visitor with welcome back messages and greet the guests in their local language. And there are a lot of cool technologies out there that can offer these kind of tools that ultimately allows you to personalize that booking journey. And also this helps the guests to quickly find what they need and to avoid frustration. So digitalizing this process allows you to reach more markets and ultimately increasing your revenue opportunities. Also, make sure that you save the guest information in a CRM. So remember returning guests. So this way you can remember what special touches to leave for them or what upsells that you should offer. And as a final point here, utilize every touch point that you can in creating that unique customer journey, which ultimately keeps the guests coming back. And remember, you're in it for the long game. And this is ultimately what hospitality is all about. And it's also what creates better reviews and ultimately better revenue opportunities. So next slide, please. So there are a lot of tools that can help you personalize your product. And here's a great example of a tool that remembers returning guests by name and adjusts their message to the guest's local language. So look for details like this when you're trying out the different tools. Next slide, please. There are many new tools that ultimately helps you to drive traffic and optimize your website. And it's really important that you try new things and that you see what works best for your property. And something that works for the property next door might not work for you, and vice versa. So track your results, and with each new campaign or tool, determine what you want to gain out of that tool. So decide how you can measure it, how you can track the results over a period of multiple weeks, as an example. And make sure that you know how you can determine if this tool was successful to you. And analyze your results and see what works best. Discard what doesn't work and constantly try new things. Never give up. And lastly, of course, recognize success on your team. Nothing can make a bigger impact than a happy employee who can see that they're making a difference. So determine a way to measure your employees' performance in this specific regard. And it can be through, for example, increased website bookings, through messaging or phone. But we have seen a number of our partners that have set up a bonus system based on points for each direct booking and upsell. And we've seen this having a great impact on increasing revenue streams, and also, of course, ultimately made staff more motivated in their job to help them to drive more direct bookings.
Thank you so much, Nicholas. Good insights. That wraps up the first part of the session today. So now we have some time for questions. So please feel free to jump in and type your questions in the chat. I will look for questions, but in the meantime, I know that that Uli has a question for Nicholas. I think he's on mute. Let's see here. I will just read it here, Nicholas.
Sure.
So it's a question for you, Nicholas. In your experience working with hotels, what practices have you seen that stood out to you on the part of hotels that really stood out?
Good question. I think recently we actually saw a really great example from a hotel that we're working with in Berlin called Hotel Palace. And once we actually implemented our messaging widget to them, they immediately created this PowerPoint system, point system that I mentioned in the presentation, which directly translated into bonus for the reservations and front desk teams. And ultimately, this, of course, encouraged employees to increase revenue via direct bookings and upsells. So basically, they've been able to increase revenue and motivate the employees and to basically create a sense of involvement in increasing overall hotel revenues. And I would also argue, of course, that this makes the job more exciting for the team members in general, a general purpose and a strong goal to achieve. And I was actually personally really amazed and impressed by how quickly and simply they actually started this process. So I think that could be a good example.
Thanks a lot. There's another question here. What do you see as the biggest issue with the existing customer journey, Nicholas?
Again, a good question. I think, as I mentioned briefly, I used to work in the wholesale segment, and I really saw how hard it is for guests to get the help that they need through, for example, this type of middleman. So there's a lot of sold out, there's a lot of lost questions, and there's a lot of lost requests, etc. And ultimately, we feel that the best way for guests to have a good experience is by actually communicating directly with the hotel. Personally, I have a family, and I know there's nothing worse than showing up at a hotel for, only realizing when you arrive at the destination that, and for that one-off family vacation in the year, and you realize when you're there that things are not as you expected. This is a very stressful environment. So business travel, I would argue, is one thing, but when you travel somewhere with your family, it's really important that things go right. It's a whole different types of emotional experience. So the right service and help to assist with complicating bookings, I personally feel is the key to solving this issue. So families and complicating bookings are a huge segment of the market. It's, I believe the latest number is over 20%. So aside from travel agents, I think there's much here that we can really help to push this conversion overall on the website.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for Ulrich, Nicholas?
Yeah, absolutely. Is his mic on, and is he going to be able to?
Let's have a look.
I'm actually, I'm sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I had a wrong button. Sorry for that.
No problem.
We hear you now.
I guess only one thing that came up is do you feel there's a sense of or a big reluctance from hotels to spend money on clicks?
Yeah. There's always a certain reluctance that is basically put down to the fact that hotels don't really like to spend money on upfront, and that obviously anything that is not guaranteeing them bookings is obviously seen as something risky. As I mentioned before, that is a completely understandable point of view. But as I also said before, Booking.com is doing it everywhere, and they wouldn't do it if it wouldn't be successful, and if the commission that they get from the hotels wouldn't be spent with the profitability. So if they get 15% commission, usually Booking might only have 8 or 7% costs on those marketing channels. So that's something that should convince hotels that it is possible and to actually have a similar return of investments. And I mean, yeah, absolutely, we can see it in our own results with our own hotels. You can do it, but obviously, like you said, you need to look at your conversion, you need to look at your pricing, you need to go after your client and make sure that they don't drop out of your website. And it's quite simple for the hotels that don't want to take that risk. It's completely up to them. But as I said, the biggest risk is not to take any risk at all. And if you don't take any risk at all, you take the risk that one day maybe Booking.com is producing 80% of your revenues. And if they increase the commission from 15 to 20%, the question is, what can you do against it? So it's really not about, about bashing to Booking.com here all the time. I mean, it's definitely a booking channel that you need, but you should not get all the bookings through one channel. You should have a variety of channels, a portfolio of channels. I mean, your website will potentially never be the biggest channel in your hotel. It depends, obviously, what kind of hotels you are, but it's very hard. But it should also not be like a small, unimportant channel. You should have a good share of your total bookings through your website. You should use channels like Google and Meta to actually have an additional competitor to the OTAs. And you can only do that if you embrace new business models and if you take the risk. And risk also can be reduced by having the right partners and having the right technology in place.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks a lot, Uli. Makes a lot of sense.
Yes, and thank you all so much for attending our webinar today. We will send all attendees a follow-up email with a recording of the session and with a unique special offer as well that will be available through the end of December. We hope you all enjoyed today's webinar and have a great Christmas. Please feel free to reach out to us, to either of the speakers if you have any questions. Thanks a lot. Goodbye.
Great. Thanks a lot as well, and happy Christmas. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Merry Christmas. Bye-bye. Thank you.